welcome to a beautiful, crisp, sunny Friday. Well, it is in London, so I hope it is for the rest of you wherever you are. This is the first of our Women in Recruitment 2021 Get Inspired session. And today we're really delighted to welcome Olivia Reid to talk to us. Olivia's a coach who works with women to gain confidence, both in the workplace, I think, and in their private lives as well. She's previously got a background in the advertising industry, so I have no doubt, Olivia, you've been there and done it when it comes to having to dig deep and address that inner confidence. And confidence is something that I think is important to all of us. And if you look at the definition of confidence, confidence comes from the Latin meaning trust. So when we talk about confidence, and today I think a lot of it will be talking about how do we trust ourselves, how do we have self-confidence, how do we trust in who we are, and many of us, I'm sure, at times have lacked in that. So today Olivia is going to be giving us some direction and tips around how we draw on that, so that we can trust ourselves in the decisions that we make, trust ourselves in the goals that we set, and have the best chance and opportunity to achieve them. Often in our sessions, we have a lot of dialogue and it's quite interactive, but we've got a large audience today. We've got a record audience of over 250 registered participants, so there's no pressure on Olivia whatsoever. So thank you all for signing up. But on that basis, we felt we would make the session slightly more presentation orientated because of the volumes of us on the call. So your questions will please be coming through to me on the chat box, and we will absolutely do our best to answer as many of those, but we're going to keep them to the end this time so that we give Olivia an opportunity to get through her content. So yeah, please do, as always, pop your questions in the chat box, and those that we don't address in this session, Olivia has said she's very happy to pick up with you afterwards via email or on LinkedIn. So Olivia, welcome to today. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise in this area, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Natasha. So hi everyone, very nice to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, so confidence. As Natasha mentioned, I am a coach and I work with women on confidence and to help them gain confidence and motivation and purpose in their work. So confidence is a really interesting subject to me. It's a very meaty subject, and it can often feel a bit like the sort of holy grail to success in life, the sort of answer to everything. So I've got a few slides that I'm just going to share with you now. And then we'll get started. Can you see that? Is the screen up?
It is, that's great, thank you. And just before you start, a few people have been asking me if it's QA box or chat box. Please, if you can, the chat box, just because then everything's in one place. So yes, chat box, please, thank you.
Brilliant. And as Natasha says, we'll try and get some questions at the end, but if we don't manage to get to them all, I will follow up with you afterwards. And there's a few resources I mentioned along the way. Again, I'll drop you all an email after this on Monday, just noting down all the resources that I mention. So yeah, confidence. Today we're going to talk about what confidence is, how it affects us, and most importantly, how to get more of it. And yeah, Natasha gave a great sort of definition of what confidence is there in a sort of general term. But I think it's really important to look at what confidence means to each of us personally. And the way to do that is we're going to do a couple of exercises first off, just to think about a time where we felt underconfident, where we felt lacking in confidence. So thinking about how that lack of confidence affects us. And then we'll do a quick exercise of looking at when we felt really confident and what that felt like and looked like for us on a personal level. So to start with, that exercise on low confidence. So I would love you to now just think back to a time where you felt really lacking in confidence. So have a little think of a particular scenario recently where you felt lacking in confidence. Okay, when you think back to that time, what do you notice? What do you notice about your body and your energy levels? And what about your thoughts? What are you saying to yourself? What do you hear? And notice how this lacking confidence is affecting your actions and your behaviours. What's going on there? Okay, so hopefully you've got a bit of an image in your head or a feeling in your head of that state where you felt really lacking in confidence. And I think what you probably will have found, probably unanimously, will have found that that lack of confidence actually affects you in 3 ways. It affects you in terms of your physiology, your body, it closes over, you're hunched, you have sort of low energy. And then it affects your thoughts. You have your inner critic rears its head, you've got negative chatter going on, these negative spiraling thoughts. And ultimately those negative thoughts then affect your actions and they hold you back in your comfort zone. They stop you from pushing yourself forward. So it can be pretty powerful, this lack of confidence on us. And as women, unfortunately, the effects of confidence are particularly potent. And this is really seen in a really wonderful book called The Confidence Code. It's written by Katty Kay and Claire Shipman. They're 2 American journalists. Fantastic book, really, really fascinating on all aspects of confidence and what leads to high and low confidence. But they refer to this gap, this confidence gap between men and women. And in talking about this gap between men and women, they cite the study that was done by 2 psychologists back in 2003. And in this study, they found that men overestimated their abilities, whereas women underestimated their abilities, and yet they performed the very same. And that's fascinating. So we're all, we're working alongside our male counterparts, we're working at the same level, but the men are thinking they're here, and we're thinking we're down here, which is just, that's mind-boggling. When you think back to all the things you'd like to have said or done or tried in your life, but something held you back, that lack of confidence held you back, that's pretty powerful. So while the effects on women are particularly potent, do know that there is relief in knowing that you're not alone. It really does affect all of us. And again, in the Confidence Code, they really show this by interviewing all these incredibly successful women, from professional sportswomen to global CEOs to world leaders. And all of these women had the same thing. They all felt at one time or another, or a continuing time or another, this lack of confidence, there's something that's holding them back. Okay, so that was looking at how the lack of confidence affects us. Now let's flip it to thinking about what really confident feels like for us. What does that look like and feel like for you? So again, we're going to do a little exercise here. And again, I'd like you to just think back to a time, this time where you felt really bursting with confidence. So hopefully you've got something in your mind now, a time where you felt really bursting in confidence. So again, what do you notice about your body? And what are you saying to yourself? What do you hear? And how are you responding to others? And how do they respond back to you? And these confident thoughts, these confident feelings that you've got, this confident state, how does it affect your actions and your behaviors? Okay, hopefully you've all got a real feeling there and a memory of that really confident state. And that's really powerful. That's something that you can sort of re-anchor yourself to in times of need. So keeping that feeling, you'll see more of what confidence really means to you. And I think what you probably found is, again, that bursting in confidence, again, affects us in those 3 areas again. So it affects our physiology. This time, rather than being closed body, we're open, we're standing tall, our heads are lifted, our chins are lifted, we've probably got quite high energy. And our thoughts, rather than being sort of negative and inner criticky, they're much more positive, they're much more sort of open and forward focused. And ultimately that makes us act braver and bolder, pushing us out of our comfort zone. So really you can see that it's really powerful effect that this confidence or lack of confidence has on us. But ultimately we want to get more of it. So let's look at some tips to get more of it. And a great way of doing that is to think, if that confidence or lack of confidence affects us in those three areas, the physiology and the thoughts and the actions, what if we made changes to those three areas? Could that actually boost our confidence? And it can. We can make, so now we're going to look at some tips. We're going to first off look at the physiology, and we're going to look at some quick changes, quick fixes that we can do on the fly in the moment to change your, boost your confidence. And then we're going to look at some more longer term changes that you can do to your thoughts and your actions to create more sort of longer lasting inner confidence. So on the physiology side of things, when we make changes to our body, when we change our body, it actually changes the chemistry in our brains. And a great example of this is, some of you will no doubt have seen the brilliant TED talk by Amy Cuddy on body language. And in this TED talk, she talks about a study that she did with two groups, and she assessed the groups before and after a simulated interview. And one of the groups was told to stand in this power pose with their, hands on their hips, very open bodies for 2 minutes before the interview. And the second group were told to do the opposite, to have very closed bodies, to be hunched for 2 minutes before the interview. And the results were fascinating. They found that those that had stood in the power pose had increased levels of testosterone, making them feel powerful and assertive. And they had decreased levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. So it really shows that just changing your body, just 2 minutes changing your body can change the chemistry in your brain and make you feel better. And I think this is a great tool. I did it for 2 minutes before today's session, but I would just point out that you do this in private. So I think the Tory leaders might have been told about this power pose thing, but perhaps it was a bit of a mixed message, and they were told that if they stand with their legs wide apart, they'd look powerful and assertive. I'm not sure they do. They kind of look a bit awkward, but the point being that it really isn't something you're doing in public. It's not for other people to see you. It's you're doing it in private, because it's about changing the chemistry in your brain. So a next tip on the physiology is our breathing. So you know that when you're feeling in a negative state, your breathing goes haywire, and that sort of compounds the negative state. So that's about when we're in that negative state, we're sort of taking short inhales. And when we do that, the body is triggering your sympathetic nervous system. And when it does that, it increases your heart rate, your blood pressure, and ultimately the cortisol and adrenaline levels in your brain, which is kind of getting you ready for your fight or flight mode. Whereas when you exhale, you then switch over to your parasympathetic nervous system. And in that state, it lowers the blood pressure, the heart rate, the cortisol levels. So it really is a way of calming you down. So a great technique is that is a breathing technique, the 4-7-8, and it's about focusing more on your exhale. So getting rid of those negative chemicals and exhaling for longer. So in the 4-7-8 breathing technique, you breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. So you're breathing out for longer. And when you're doing that, you're breathing from within your diaphragm, from the depths of your belly. So I'd love for you to give it a go now. So if you're just sitting on your chair, perhaps put your hands on one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And what you're going to do now is I just want you to breathe in through your nose on a count of 4. And as you do that, I want your tummy to expand. So on a count of 4, then you're going to hold your breath for a count of 7, and your tummy should be fully expanded. And then you're going to exhale slowly, pushing your tummy to expunge out all that air on a count of 8. And you can repeat that and do that for sort of 10 minutes at a time to really change that chemistry in your brain, to really boost those positive feelings, that confident state. So that's really a quick fix that you can do in the moment. And people who do this regularly, who literally just practice 10 minutes of deep belly breathing every day, are known to sort of handle stress more effectively and to have a general better overall well-being. Okay, moving on, our next tip, our final tip in the physiology is smiling. So obviously when we feel good, we smile, but it does work the other way around. When you smile, it boosts your serotonin levels, the mood enhancing serotonin levels. And as Darwin said, even the simulation of an emotion can arouse it in our brains. So in the moment, if you're not feeling it, fake a smile and it will actually change the chemistry in your brain. You will feel a bit better. Okay, so that was 3 tips we looked at, 3 quick changes you can do to your body in the moment to just boost a bit of confidence, to boost that confident state. Now we're going to move on to more longer term changes that you can make to your thoughts and your actions for more sort of lasting inner confidence. So the first one we've got here is about challenging those negative thoughts and checking the validity of them. So when we're in that negative state that we were in earlier, we notice that low confidence state, we notice that we had our inner critic was there, lots of negative chatter. But often these thoughts can sort of spiral off and take on a life of their own. And they're driven by beliefs that we have about ourselves. And they're usually completely unfounded in reality. They're totally distorted. So it's about stopping those thoughts in their tracks and challenging them, checking whether they're actually true or whether they're just sort of stories we're telling ourselves. And it's almost like putting those thoughts into the court of law and asking what evidence is there for this thought and what evidence is there against this thought. So, for example, you might be in a meeting and you notice someone yawning. And maybe you're in a meeting and you're presenting and you notice someone yawning, and in that negative state, you might spiral off and think, they're yawning, they're bored, everyone's bored, this is a terrible presentation, oh my God, I'm never going to amount to anything and I'm never going to get that promotion. Spiraled off, gone mad. In that moment, if you could take a moment to check the evidence for and against that thought, you might find that the evidence against that thought is, and you're looking for facts, like real evidence rather than assumptions. Okay, the room's hot. That lady actually has a newborn baby. I did the presentation last week to Bob and he loved it. And actually you'd find that you might have a more compelling, truer version of events of, rather than one yawn means I won't get the promotion and I'll never amount to anything. One yawn means someone's tired, carry on. And this challenging of our thoughts is a big part of cognitive behavioral therapy. And there are some wonderful resources out there. And again, I will send round on Monday some of the resources I mentioned in today's session. But there are these great CBT thought record sheets where it goes into a bit more detail about when you recognize these, it's referred to as negative automatic thoughts in CBT. So when you have these thoughts, recognizing them, putting them down and checking the evidence for and against. So I will send that round afterwards. But yeah, this is about challenging those thoughts, checking the validity of them. Okay, our next tip on changing the way we think is about flipping from, rather than focusing on the negative, think about our strengths and our achievements, so flipping it to the positive. Positive psychology tells us that when we play to our strengths, we are much more confident, we are more successful, and ultimately we're happier in life. And as women, we're really quick to sort of focus on our shortcomings, to call out our weaknesses, to sort of share them with the world in a very honest way. But actually, if we can, but we rarely talk about our strengths. But if we could, instead of thinking about the things that we're less good at, and instead of comparing ourselves to other people, Instead, if we could flip it and start thinking about what we're good at, that can really, really help you. And I do this a lot with my clients, getting them to think about their strengths when they're facing a particular challenge and thinking about how their strengths could help them in that particular situation. And to give a personal example, when the latest lockdown news happened and the very real reality of homeschooling came to play, I felt a bit overwhelmed by these negative thoughts of, God, how am I going to deliver on the work commitments that I have? How am I going to be a patient teacher to 3 boys under 8 when I'm not trained? I don't know how to do it, and it's all overwhelming. So I sat and I thought, okay, which strengths could help me over the next few weeks? And the 2 strengths that came out for me in that moment were calmness and positivity. And I've held those strengths in the back of my mind over the last few weeks, and it's really helped me because it gets my mind to focus on those 2 strengths rather than on everything that I can't do. So it's a bit like if I said to you, don't think about a grey elephant. The first thing you think about is a grey elephant. And that's because your subconscious can't differentiate between the positive and the negative. It takes things literally, it can't reason. So it's just following the command from your sort of conscious mind. It's just as Henry Ford's famous quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So it's just really important to train your brain to think about the positives here. So just thinking about your strengths, an action that you could take away from today would be to take a moment to think about what are your strengths. And your strengths are things that obviously that you're good at, that perhaps people have said about you in an appraisal, or that other people rely on you for. But also your strengths are things that energize you in life. There is a strength underneath there. There's a strength at play. So pull out those strengths, make a list of those strengths, or even ask yourself, how would your friends describe you at your very best? And make that list of strengths and carry it around with you. Put it in a notebook, refer back to it, or put it on a wall in front of your desk, but have it as a reference point that you continually look back to, feeding that positivity. And you can even, one client was really creative, and she created a dice, and she wrote 6 of her strengths on each sides of the dice. And she'd use it in situations if she was feeling stuck. She'd roll the dice and see which strength popped up and see what options opened up for her when she played to that strength. And the next one here, just carrying on with the positive psychology, is about achievements. Again, we're so quick to, we work away, working hard on something, and then we finally get there and we've moved on to the next thing without even thinking about taking it in, relishing that achievement, and really celebrating that success. But celebrating success is what really boosts confidence. So again, an action you could take away here is to start making that a daily practice. So at the end of each day, think back and think of 3 things that you did today that you're proud of, 3 things that you've achieved. And it doesn't have to be big things, it can be small, but it's just making that a daily practice and doing that for 2 months, reflecting back on 3 things that you're proud of from the day. And another way of doing it is to look sort of longer term back. So in December of last year, looking back over the year that had been, it would be very easy to think that the year had been a washout, that we'd stagnated, that nothing happened. And yet doing that exercise with some of my clients, we found that they'd achieved loads, and seeing all those successes written down was a real sort of confidence boost and motivational boost for the year ahead. So take the time to celebrate those achievements and relish in that moment. Okay, and our last tip on changing our thoughts is about a growth mindset, is about our mindset. So Carol Dweck, Dr. Carol Dweck spent years researching into success factors. And she found that it's not just our capabilities and our skills that create this success, but it's also just as much about a mindset. And the mindset she refers to are the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. In the simplest terms, a fixed mindset is when you believe that your intelligence, your capabilities, and even your potential is fixed, it's capped. Whereas in a growth mindset, you believe that they can be developed. So when you're in a fixed mindset, you tend to stick to what you know. You might avoid challenges or pushing yourself out of your comfort zone because you're afraid of failure. And you receive feedback personally, you take feedback personally. Whereas in a growth mindset, you would see negative feedback and challenges as an opportunity for growth and learning. The interesting thing is that we're all a little bit of both. So some of us will have a bit more natural inclination towards the fixed mindset, and some of us will be more naturally inclined towards the growth mindset. But essentially we do have a bit of both, and it is within our power to develop more of a growth mindset, to create more of that success. And the key to doing that, the key to developing more of a growth mindset, is really just to have an awareness of these two different mindsets, to be aware of the fixed and the growth mindset. And then it's to see that you have a choice. So when your fixed mindset is triggered, you can choose to develop more of a growth mindset in that moment. So to give an example for you, an example of a trigger for you might be receiving negative feedback. When you're in a fixed mindset, you take that feedback personally and you'd reframe it as being part of your identity. So you might read that feedback as I'm a failure, as part of your identity. Whereas in a growth mindset, when you receive that negative feedback, you might initially feel a few negative emotions of sort of sadness or disappointment or shame. That's okay, that's natural. We're not trying to deny these feelings. We're not robots, we're humans. We have these emotions and these feelings. But in a growth mindset, after having those feelings, you would then see that one piece of feedback is an isolated incident. It's not part of your identity. It's part of a sort of longer learning journey for you. And you'd see that feedback as an opportunity to help you moving forward. And you'd think about how that feedback could help you in the future. And another example of a trigger for a fixed mindset might be when you're feeling stuck at work, when you're perhaps writing a report or working on something and you're just feeling really, really stuck. And in that moment, in a fixed mindset, it could be that what's going on is that there's a bit of perfectionism going on. You're afraid to share it in case there are any errors, and you don't want to be judged by those errors. Whereas, again, in that moment, if you were to choose to adopt a growth mindset, you'd appreciate that this one report or this one thing you're working on isn't going to define you. It's just part of a much wider, more ongoing learning journey. It's just one isolated incident in a longer journey. And when you think like that, that allows you to sort of let go of that perfectionism, to allow a few errors, because it doesn't matter, you're still learning as you're going. And that allows you to sort of put yourself out there more and take more risks. And this sort of perfectionism in women is really seen in this. There was an internal report at Hewlett-Packard, and this is cited in both the Confidence Code, the book that I mentioned earlier, but also in Sheryl Sandberg's Leaning In. There was this internal report at Hewlett-Packard, and they found that women will apply for a job when they are 100% qualified. Men will apply for a job when their experience matches 60% of the job spec. That's mind-boggling. There's a 40% gap there. So as women, we're perfectionists, and that perfectionism it's stopping us, it's holding us back, it's stopping us from taking action. So really there's a real power there, and with this particular tip, it's remembering that in that moment that there are two mindsets. There is this fixed and growth mindset, and choosing when that fixed mindset is being triggered, choose to adopt more of a growth mindset. Let go of that perfectionism, allow yourself to make a few mistakes, to take a few risks, and understand and appreciate that it's all just part of a longer, ongoing learning journey. Okay, so we've looked at changes that we can do to our bodies to change the chemistry in our brains in the moment, quick fixes and on the fly. And then we've looked at more longer term changes that we can do to our thoughts to make more longer lasting inner confidence. Our last one is about ditching all of that and just taking action. It's about thinking less and doing more. And this is around goals. So we saw earlier that when we're in that confident state, we are braver and bolder and we aim higher, but it works the other way around. When we set goals, it really boosts our confidence. And I guess the main reason that happens is because when you've set yourself a goal, it quietens all the other noise around you. You're just focused on that goal. You've got direction, and all the other noise becomes tuned out. Goals give you purpose and direction in life. And when you've got purpose and direction, you're in charge, you're in control, you're in the driving seat. If you don't have goals and you don't have direction, then you're directionless, you've got no focus, and it might feel a bit more like life's driving you rather than perhaps the other way around. And you might feel there's much more potential for you to get swayed by other people's agendas if you don't have that stake in the ground, that goal, that direction. And having that goal, it really motivates you to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Because if you've got a goal and you've thought about the action steps, the stepping stones that you need to take to get to that longer term goal, then the actions that you're going to take, the decisions that you're going to make are braver and bolder and more confident decisions, more confident choices, more confident actions, because you understand the wider benefit, because it's all pushing you towards this longer term goal. But I do think it's worth pointing out here that for some people, goals can and may have had, and some of you may be listening and thinking, I hate goals, they make me feel terrible. And there are times where goals can have the opposite effect. But when that happens, it's because that goal is not something that you're emotionally invested in. Goals have to inspire and motivate you on an emotional level. You've got to connect with them. They've got to be goals that are for you and not for anyone else. And that's the reason why 80% apparently of New Year's resolutions are binned by mid-Feb. So by mid-Feb, 80% of New Year's resolutions are just ditched. And that's because they are goals that perhaps people have felt like they've had to set for themselves because society says get fit in January or give up alcohol or whatever it is, or maybe someone else set it for them. They're not emotionally invested in it. Goals, and actually in work, that can be quite a tricky thing, because perhaps you have goals that are set for you by your company or your line manager. So it's really important in that moment to be involved in the goal setting process and perhaps set your own personal goal that aligns with that wider company goal. So you've got the company goal and your goal that's aligning with it, so that you can create that motivation for yourself with those goals. And I guess goal setting, you could do a whole session on goal setting. It is a bit of a skill, and it is something that people need support with. Whether that's the form of a mentor or a coach or a friend, whatever it is. But some of the goal setting can be tough. But for now, there are sort of 3 quick fixes or 3 quick rules that I can share with you for goal setting. The first is what we've just talked about, making sure that you really understand why this goal is important to you. Why, on an emotional, personal level, is this goal important to you? And the second is to make sure that goal is specific. There's no point setting vague goals. I want to get fit. That's vague. It needs to be specific and with a deadline at the end of it. So rather than I want to get fit, could be I will do 2 Joe Wicks sessions a week with my kids between now and the Easter holidays. I'm emotionally invested in that because it's doing it with my children. It's specific. So it's something that I'm going to engage with more. And the last one is just to make sure that you then, once you've got that goal, create the action plan, the stepping stones that will lead you to that goal. So to kickstart that goal setting process, I'd love for you, perhaps after this session, to think back over everything that we've covered today and think about a goal that you could set yourself based on that content. We've covered lots of tips. There's too many tips there for you to take action on. To try and take action on all of them would be just too overwhelming. So just pick one or maybe even 2 that really resonated with you on a personal level. And what goal could you set yourself with that in mind, with that content in mind, to sort of help you on your personal development journey to sort of build more confidence. And remember, make sure that it's something that's emotionally invested, that's specific, has a deadline, and then create an action plan to go with it. Okay, well, just going to recap on what we've done. So we've talked today about what confidence is. We've looked at what it looks like for you on a personal level. You've felt and seen what good confidence, great confidence feels like you. And then we've talked about the various tips to get more confidence. We talked about, on the physiological side, 3 changes that you can do in the moment, quick fixes to change the chemistry in your brain to boost your confidence in that moment. And then we looked at 3 ways, longer term changes that you can do to your thoughts to boost more sort of longer lasting inner confidence. And the first one was checking the validity of those spiraling negative thoughts, checking for evidence for and against. The second was flipping away from thinking about the negatives and focus instead on your strengths and your achievements, focusing on the positive. And then the last one was remembering to have that awareness of these 2 different mindsets. And when that fixed mindset is triggered, choosing to adopt more of a growth mindset. And then the last one was, having heard all of that, set yourself a goal based on this content. Setting goals means you're ditching your thinking and you're moving into action. And that's where you start to build the confidence. Okay, well, thanks so much. Over to you, Natasha.
Thanks, Olivia. That was really fantastic and so nicely and clearly structured. Thank you. It made it really easy to understand and to relate to. We did have one question actually on the goal setting piece, which hopefully we've got time to answer. Which is, do you have any advice for goals setting during COVID? I want to set goals for myself for 2021, but I'm struggling with the current limitations to think about what's achievable.
Brilliant. So I think it's really interesting that to think about what is within your remit. And there's a framework, a wider framework called the SMART framework, which would help here. You want your goals to be specific and time bound, as we talked about, and motivating, but you also want to make sure that they are realistic, that they are attainable. So thinking about sort of what's within your control and what's out of your control. So thinking about that circle of sort of control and thinking about, okay, with all the elements that are within my control, where would I like to get to in, if it was goal setting for 3 months time, if now's, mid-Jan, where would I like to be by the Easter holidays? How would I feel really good? What would I have achieved if I could fast forward to that point?
Thank you. And I think you were really right when you talked about goals needing to be something you're emotionally invested in. And I was just thinking about how often as managers, and particularly in the recruitment industry, which is so target orientated, there's so often that manager sets the target for somebody and then question why that person's just not hitting it or not achieving it and getting frustrated. And I think, you know, what you said there was it's so important that one agrees the goals, one understands why they're important. They're not just a number or an outcome, but they actually have something that's important to me in them, and I've agreed them, and so therefore I have a connection with them. So I think as a leader and a manager, which many people might be on this call, that's also a great takeaway when we want to help build confidence in the people that work for us, not just ourselves. So I thought that was really powerful. And I did chuckle at the reference to not achieving goals when someone else has set them for you, because I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he said, oh, well, I'm meant to be doing dry January with my wife, but I do it every year and she's given up after 4 days. And I thought, yeah, well, that's because she's not invested in it, is she? You told her you want her to support you.
Exactly. Exactly, it's someone else, or it's society telling you that it's January, therefore it should be dry, or whatever it is.
That's right. So there was a lot of things I certainly related to, and our audience have come back. And let me just share with you some of the feedback you were getting, which is, I love this topic already. Very refreshing, great presentation. Honestly, one of the clearest and actionable webinars I've attended. Really good session. Thank you. And then we've just had one other question come in, which I think we might just have time for, which is probably quite relevant, actually. One of the biggest issues in confidence is when asking for promotion/pay rises. And if we make this the last question, it's probably quite a relevant and appropriate one for a lot of us, because most of us aren't very good at asking for these things as women, I think.
So sorry, the question was, how do we
promote pay rises? Any tips when I need to find the confidence to address those issues?
Yeah, good question. I think that is quite a meaty topic to try and yes, but it's about getting yourself in the moment before that conversation. So getting yourself in that confident state, whether that's through the physical tips or whatever it is, and thinking about ultimately why you want that, and the reasons to really, again, in that moment, if you were to think beforehand about your strengths, so remind yourself, why is it that you deserve this promotion, or you deserve this pay rise? Again, the pay rise thing is always a tricky one, because it's within, you know, there's only set parameters, particularly in COVID times, there are limitations. But it's about having that, building that confidence beforehand, reminding yourself of what you've achieved that year, what you've done, what your strengths are, how you've helped the team, how you've achieved those goals. If you've set goals and you've achieved them, sharing all of those and celebrating those successes. And again, as women, there's another wonderful book as well that points out about how women rise, and how as women we don't talk about if we've done well. We tend to say we the team, and that's lovely, but actually there are times where you do need to shine a light on what you've done, because it might have gone unnoticed. We can't, again, there's a tendency sometimes, apparently, as women, that we can assume that our great work will just be noticed and that's enough. It's not enough. You do have to talk about how you're doing and how well you're doing, and that is going to help the conversation, I would have thought. You're
so right. I think the I versus we positioning, I've observed that through my entire career, and only learnt myself how I was saying we instead of I towards the end of my career. And actually, I think you're spot on that small little adjustment made such a difference when I changed my language in that way. And I think as well, you're absolutely right that, and I know it's written in the textbooks, but again, I really believe it is true that as women, we do expect to have our shoulder tapped and told we're doing a great job, and we don't like to tell people that we are, and we miss out because of that, actually, and it doesn't help us. And I think it's helpful to understand that if we can dig deep, like you've said, and it's almost building our own business case, isn't it, for who we are. And we wouldn't be going into the dragon's den and asking for an investment in our business without a business case. So if we're going for a promotion or a pay rise, how do we create the business case for us? And as you said, going through all those stages then of working out, well, why am I asking for this? Why do I believe this is important? Actually, we give ourselves the strength to present the case, but also to believe in that case, because it's really hard to fight for something, isn't it? When you're not quite sure whether it's really something that you can fight for. So I think these are really great tips to help in that way. And I would recommend everyone really does take these tips on board, because the situations you've referenced and talked to over my 30 years, they are very, very real. And the more we can understand them and accept them, the more we can navigate our way around them. So I'm going to close by saying thank you again and reading you 2 of the last messages that have come in, because they're very nice ones. Thank you, Olivia. In the wrong mindset this morning. I'm feeling low in confidence, but this has turned it around. I'm smiling now. Great session. Honestly, one of the best sessions I've ever been involved in. Really clear actions I can use straight away. And thank you so much. So many practical tips. So once again, that was a fabulous session. You touched in the session on mentoring and how goal setting is an important part of working with a mentor. And I just would like to remind everybody on the call that we do have the Women in Recruitment mentoring program. We are actually modifying and evolving that over the next couple of months, and it's going to be a new format and platform that we'll be working off, which is going to offer such opportunities. We're hoping to have some of Olivia's content on our resources when we go live with that. So and her webinar will also be on our Women in Recruitment website, and you can contact her. I think Jo has sent around Olivia's email address earlier on in today's session. But mentoring, and Olivia and I were talking about this earlier, is another great way of helping to support your mindset and focus, and I hope as many of you as possible take up that opportunity. But Olivia, you've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so very much. We are back with our next Women in Recruitment session on the 5th of February, where we'll be talking to Zoe Morris from the Frank Group, and she'll be talking about her reflections of 2020 and operating through 2020 and what she's taken from it. So have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Olivia, I think we might be seeing you again soon.
I just want a last level thank you to everyone, and please, I would love to hear from you. If you want to carry on the conversation, it's a big subject, please do get in contact on LinkedIn or drop me an email. I'll be sending the resources round that I mentioned on Monday, and please do get in contact if you've got any specific questions or incidents to talk about.
That's very kind, thank you. So have a lovely weekend, all of you. Take care, keep confident, keep smiling, and go into next week feeling very strong. All the best. Bye bye.
Thanks, Natasha.